Welcome to the Hog Market Talk podcast, your weekly deep dive into hog market fundamentals, breaking news, and industry insights. Trading commodity futures and options involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors.
Today is April Fool's. We've got April 1st here, so I thought I'd have Jeff on today.
That's why I'm back on the podcast. It's finally making sense.
Finally makes sense. Well, let's dive into this hog market here a little bit, Jeff. Just worth noting, I want to talk about the June chart just a little bit here and some of the chart work we've been looking at. So I'm going to have Kate pull this up. So this is a June chart. When I'm looking at some of the moving averages, is which one of the ways I really like to track futures months. So this is a June lean hog futures. You can see, so we've got the white line right at a support level of where we've been at the last 3 days here. That would be our 10-day moving average. Green is 20 up top that it seems like we're currently going to hit the head of on some resistance. And then you've got red as a next support point below us, and then pink I would call a downside target if we broke through that, for example. This, I think, is going to be very interesting as we kind of approach that 10 and 100-day moving average together on a support point, how these June hogs act. And I'm curious if we can try to break through that that pretty major resistance of the 20-day sitting above us. So just from a chart perspective, these are some of the things I've been focused on technically here lately.
Well, as you well know, Mike, I mean, from our chair, and there's some people, obviously, they'll trade technicals, and that's all they'll trade. They'll ignore the fundamentals, right? That's not the camp that we're in. I think when you try to tie some fundamentals to those technical marks is where it becomes valuable. Mm-hmm. So as I look at that chart and I'm watching your 20-day moving average, that's where we kind of hit our head on, I believe it was Friday or Monday. To me, that was basically a day and a half rally that we got out of a fairly bullish hogs and pigs report.
Now that's significant.
I
think it is.
I agree. And it's also like that. That's not a bad rally off in today's world from a hogs and pigs report, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Like it's not going to be this huge game changer like it was maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago, where, hey, a hogs and pigs report, quarterly supply report would completely change the trend of the marketplace. That's not what they are today. It's a day, 2-day type of movement, and then we're back to looking at what's next on the fundamental, from the fundamental standpoint. So day and a half rally, hit our head on top of that 20-day moving average. Now we look at fundamentals. They're not supporting $107, $108 June future. But today, fundamentals are not near that optimistic. But now let's fast forward. Let's flip it around and start talking about the levels of support that you're looking at. Mm-hmm. I think the fundamentals can support that. And that we maybe don't have to. Where'd you have that line at, like 104 or something?
Yeah, just below 104, there is that 100-day moving average. That'll be pretty significant support, I would assume.
I would very much agree with that. And I would hope that the fundamentals can kind of support us from that type of a level. Mm-hmm. We're still going to have quite a bit of premium in those June futures to where today's CME index is at, obviously. So there is some risk in making that statement. But, hopefully we can at least not get any more bad news from a fundamental standpoint. And eventually no good news will become bad news as time passes, right? Mm-hmm. And then the June futures try to hold that premium. But, hopefully short term here we can at least stabilize things like product values. And then I think we can hold that 104 type money.
H&P came out, Thursday?
The what?
Thursday last week was H&P?
Yeah.
So with that being the case too, Friday we saw a massive update in the cattle market following that up too. So you basically had the H&P report get traded a little bit Friday, and you had the cattle market pop. And if you look at that chart, your big first day that we had there, Friday, in that trade basically was kind of where we started to challenge some of these technical trends, really pretty big breakout up above that 10-day. So I like when we can have a significant fundamental report, some big shift, and we're able to start developing a new trend or challenge it on the technical side off of that. So some things that have happened here this week that we kind of like to follow as well, Jeff. Cattle are ripping lately.
Absolutely.
Do you think that has helped hold this hog market up or had any impact on
sure.
it at all? Yeah.
Yeah, no question in my mind that's been related. Some of the reason I say that is because the cattle seem like they got a bit of the mind of their own. What I mean by that, they're not experiencing the fundamentals from a huge standpoint to support them. So just a ton of buying interest going into that market right now.
Which technically means nobody really knows why cattle are going up right now. They just are.
I didn't quite want to come at it that aggressively, Mike, but that is my opinion.
People have some okay reasons, but normally people at least have a wild theory of like, oh yeah, it's because of this. And the best answer I've got is, well, cash is up a little bit. So I feel like there's some interesting money flow things going on for sure.
100%.
What about on the like demand side? Then seeing what choice cutout's done, how's pork cutout in handling this as well?
Well, and that's one of the things when I talk about the positivity in the futures right now of the hog market. It's the product values, for an example, are not supporting that kind of optimism, right? And that's part of the reason why we had to pull back here a little bit last couple of days, and why cattle have continued to run higher. But we're going to be off week over week on pork cutout. About $2.50 lower week over week on the composite. A lot of that has come from that ham market. I know you guys have been talking about that quite a bit, but we had a classic ham meltdown here a little over a week ago, where volume started going up on the negotiated level, prices go down. We just ran into this tight spot as far as ham supplies. Looks like we had to hit that 70-cent level on hams and found some really good support there. So this is one of those things that we're watching like, okay, I think this is something that can build support off the 70-cent level. Can we get back to that 80-cent type money on hams? And then that will help support the product values in the upper 90s. Should be able to let your technical support level in that 104 June area hold, Mike.
What other fundamentals are you looking at right now on this hog market that you think matter?
Trying to keep a close eye on weights and on the harvest rates. We're going to have a little bit shorter week this week with Easter, of course.
Starting to normalize ish.
Well, what we've put about 5 weeks now consecutively higher harvest rates than what we did last year. Which Hogs and Pigs report supported that, by the way, right?
Yep.
2.5% more in that heaviest weight category. But we're just making sure that we don't get behind on weights. We don't really expect them to go drastically low or anything like that, because return over feed is excellent. But we need them to kind of continue trying sideways instead of higher. That would indicate at least we're working through the available supply that we have in front of us right now, even though it might be inflated just a little bit. We're not going to get further behind and push what is now kind of a minor issue as far as supply goes, push that to May 1 or something, right? Now it's like, oh, shoot, now we got a pretty bad problem compared to expectations. Like if we can't get this hog market off the mat here middle of April, going into that third week of April for sure, these futures are going to have lots of problems from $104.
There's a lot of seasonal changes right about May 1st that need to take place.
That has to go well. Yep. Otherwise, our summer futures are in a bit of trouble here.
Understood. What other things are you following in this hog market right now? I've talked about it in the past that for the most part, this hog market's been somewhat insulated to the Iran conflict. We've traded it a little bit there prior to last week. What other options? What other things are you seeing that kind of impacting this hog market right now?
Well, I do think there's some premium in those summer markets today because of the health challenges that everybody's experiencing, or at least knows.
The elephant in the room no one really wants to mention.
And I usually that's something that maybe we're talking about quite often as producers, but you don't really see much evidence in the futures markets for sure until we start experiencing, lower supply and higher prices because of some issues, right? But I think you look at how this summer market's set up with June trading a couple dollars lower than July and August. August being able to keep pace with July, not to mention the premium and the optimism that's in there. I think there's some health premium priced into those back end of the summer markets today, Mike.
Understood. And this would be also a normal seasonal here as we start to move forward. Is this health concern? Is this going to be somewhat just limited to the back half of the winter, or is this going to stretch into the summer, spring, kind of like we saw last year, for example?
And then, not too distant future, the market's going to ask itself a very tough question of, hey, is it going to show up? Because we were absolutely convinced we would see some lower numbers basically through last winter because of what happened in May or June a year ago, and never really showed up. So that we'll get down into there again. If we're not seeing some very positive news and positive trends as far as the fundamentals go by May, it's gonna be a struggle. We're gonna start pulling some of that premium out of it also.
Tough time to know how short you are too when supply does start dropping naturally that time of the year anyways, right?
For sure. Yep.
Yeah. What else you got for me here this week on this hog market?
Well, let's hit on, we did get to spend some time at a conference last week, Mike. I know we talked a little bit on the cattle side of things, but I do want to hit it on today's podcast as well. So I had the opportunity to be a panelist down in a Bloomberg event and got to interact with a lot of folks, further up the food chain, right? Mm-hmm. So folks more in the food category, protein category, and there was also a lot of energy folks there. But, a few key learnings I kind of wanted to send down the pipeline here is there's some really interesting folks that are watching some really interesting information as far as consumer price trends, right? So these guys they claim they don't exactly know who you are, but they know, Mike, how many children you have, how much pork and beef you bought this week, and when's the last time you bought pork or beef. So they're studying that information very extensively, trying to figure out demand trends, right? Obviously, the big question in everybody's mind today is what's in store for retail beef prices, and I think you'd have a really difficult time finding some of those folks that would say that beef prices can take another leg higher as far as on the retail side. I think all of the most optimistic folks I've talked to down there is kind of a sideways event as far as retail prices. Not saying cattle prices can't go up, but from the retail side, they're going to have a really hard time pushing higher prices forward. Most people would suggest retail beef prices are going to have to be a little bit lower year over year type of a thing. So that
Does
obviously
this
opens
help pork out yet? I mean,
yes, very optimistic about pork demand down there. They like what they're seeing on the beef side from a competitive protein situation, obviously. They had some really nice things to say about the pork board's relatively new approach on marketing, Taste What Pork Can Do. They just thought they were really hitting on a lot of the key points that are really important right now. Obviously, protein is super important to consumers today. As far as the generational change, that marketing campaign does a nice job of, targeting folks, in the younger generation, talking about how it can be, a lot of different recipes and things like that, showing, hey, how can this be additive to your meal? Maybe it doesn't have to be the giant pork chop in the center of the plate, right? Yeah. Maybe it can be additive. They really like that approach. Talking about quality and just a good competition to an expensive beef product today. They were quite optimistic about that.
Conference was good. Otherwise, learn anything new?
The other thing I thought was super interesting was the chicken folks there. Their thoughts are, margins are great, just like the cheaper input prices, similar to the hogs today, is driving some really good returns for the chicken producers. But they have a similar situation as hogs. We have a bottleneck as far as the finishing barns go. Maybe with somewhat the sow farms, and costs are high, interest is pretty high. It's harder to put those fixed assets down. What I heard down there was the processing capacity on the poultry side is their limiting factor today. And they think that folks will have a hard time pouring capital into that side of the industry for a lot of the same reasons that we're watching on the pig business, why the barriers to entry might be a little bit higher. So they weren't expecting huge increases in production year over year type of a thing on the poultry side either.
Very interesting. You talk about the poultry side. The whole industry is basically controlled by what, 4 companies? Tyson, Pilgrim's Pride, which is JBS, Sanderson Farms, Purdue Farms. I mean, that's it, really.
Yep.
For the whole industry. So a little bit different playing ground there, but very interesting talking point. Anything else you got for us here this week?
I think that'll cover it for today, Michael.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in today. Reminder, just click the link in the description to sign up for our daily market commentary, get fast insights into the ag markets and so much more. Also, check out our website at professionalaggmarketing.com.